Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Electro Voice, makers of the RE20 microphone, the industry standard for broadcasters and now podcasters alike. Check them out at electrovoice.com. If you enjoy our audio and video content, please leave your comments at Culture Catch in the iTunes podcast directory. And stay tuned for more smart culture. Thanks.
When you do get caught up as a young person in New York City, the hedonism is very intoxicating in New York.
Mm-hmm. And it's very rewarding to an extent when you know when to bail out.
Right.
Okay, the trouble is that people just don't realize when the party's over. There's nothing worse than being a leftover. You have to know when the party peaks, and then you have to leave. So the party peaked for me about, actually, late 80s, but it took me till the early 90s to know where to go from there.
This is Dusty Wright for the Culture Catch. Today we're very honored to be in the New York loft of the photographer, Mr. Marcus Leatherdale. Marcus, welcome to the Culture Catch.
Thank you.
You know, you were around a few years before I hit New York.
Yeah, I came 79.
79, so you had part of the Warhol factory crowd.
Yes, the second factory.
The second wave of that.
I'm post Max's Kansas City,
Right.
which I would have loved to have been.
Sure, all of us.
But I went to interview and I got to know Andy, and he started giving me jobs in interview.
Were you intimidated at all by that experience? Do you remember the first time you met him?
Yes, I do. I went with Robert Mapplethorpe, and the art director introduced me to him. And he's like, gee, great, new kid in town.
Right.
Like that. And then invited me back the next week. And ironically enough, the lunch was with, at that point, the big IT model, Cheryl Teagues.
Sure.
And Kathy Hilton, the mother of Paris Hilton,
Right.
who commissioned me to do a photo session of her. Andy Warhol was very supportive of me as an artist. I mean, he always would come to whatever I did or any events I had, or if I gave him anything that had anything to do with, he would sign it. He'd ask me to sign it. And I thought that was just him because, you know, he would sign anything. You could just walk up to him and he would sign anything. And said when he died, all his possessions were sold at Sotheby's, and I was very honored to see that he had kept a whole box.
A whole dossier on Marcus Leatherdale.
Marcus Leatherdale with everything signed.
It's incredible.
I mean, someone as famous as he was, who knew people way more famous than all would ever imagine being.
Right.
And so he
kept you on his radar.
He kept me on his radar.
You were part of the scene that redefined a new aesthetic in New York. It had the early days of punk, and then there was a transition into alternative and new wave. Danceteria, the real heavy, wonderful music scene at the Mud Club. And the bands were just extraordinary. You thought at any moment the roof could collapse.
Yeah, that was the
physically
end. That was,
dilapidated.
for me, was the end of the live music era. I mean, the last live music for me was going to see Patti Smith open for the Clash.
Sure.
And that was it.
The details thing. Let's talk about the. I mean,
Stephen Sabin is maybe someone that some people will know of if I mention. Initially, Annie Flanders, who was the publisher of Details, was also the fashion editor in Soho Weekly News. At one point, it was the more artistic version. Voice was more political,
right,
and the Soho News was more artistic.
Correct.
But otherwise, it came out at the same time, and everybody got one. They were double.
You got both of them. You have to read both.
Interview. There was those three. You had Interview, you had Soho News, and if you had those three, you were in the know. And there was an evening at a club called The Underground, and it was called Dada. And so everyone was, and we were given different booths, and I was given a booth, and I was photographing photographs of people where you couldn't see their faces, you know. So we call it undetectable. We didn't have a name for it, you know. Portraits, literally putting bags over people's heads and photographing them. So when they came to me and they said, "Would you like a page of your own?" And it started like that.
It was one of the great pieces in the magazine.
It was a full page. I had full reign. They themselves didn't know who it was going to be until I left it on the table of the art director.
Was there one shoot in particular that really brings back fond or horrible memories?
Jesus, it's so hard to say. Well, the Keith Haring one
Santa
was
Claus?
interesting because it was for the December issue, and it was actually his idea to dress up like Santa Claus. But he was too obscure, no one would ever realize who it was, so we kept his sneakers on.
With his Nike sneakers, yeah.
Nike sneakers. And then the Lee Bowery one, which is interesting, this costume in which he is wearing, completely covered in beads,
Right.
wearing a bustier and a merkin, which is a vaginal wig.
Right.
I met him at Roxy, I think. He came the next day dressed that way. We photographed in broad daylight and left that way in broad daylight. To this day, I really don't know what he really looked like at that point in time. And to see him out on Bowery and Grand flagging a cab at like 6 p.m. At the time, it all seemed kind of normal, but the whole premise of Hidden Identities was that these people had such incredible individuality, such an essence, that they didn't need to see their face for their personal style and presence to come out. And then the fun of photographing Andy just before he died, next to Caligula, the statue.
Right.
And there was a very infamous character that worked for Interview, Fred Hughes. Well, you know, he was Mr. Shock Value.
Right.
So anyway, so he was up above through the whole session while I'm trying to be serious with Andy, saying, "Come on, Andy, pull out your dick. Show him your dick. That'll be a hidden identity. Nobody see that." And he kept going, and he kept going on with that. So that was sort of a memorable one.
So Andy was almost like saying, enough with this already.
Oh no, he was just like black. He couldn't care less.
Even though you don't know who these individuals are, the strength of their character shines
Well,
through.
outside, I mean, Hidden Identities was something I did as a hoot. I mean, I used to cast people into roles the way a director would cast an actor. The first year or two, I wouldn't even tell anybody
Who the identities were,
If you
yeah.
didn't know, well, then that's your problem. You weren't
Right.
cool enough.
Right.
And then Annie took me aside and said, "Well, come on, you got to at least do like crossword puzzle thing. The next issue, you would find out who it was from the issue
clues,
before."
yeah.
So we went to that. Then it was instant gratification. We had to give it at the back at that month. So finally, it couldn't be some obscure it person at the time that if you were at the pyramid, you know, you would know who it was. It had to be Jodie Foster or Iman or Debbie Harry. It had to be a little upscale.
Right.
And then it phased out entirely into Vanity Fair, and we bailed out. It's a cross between us bailing out before we got fired, I guess. But
Right.
it was just understood that nobody wanted to go that way.
Didn't want to go that route.
We'll see what happened after Andy died is that Interview became kind of, had lost the edge.
Yeah.
Even though Andy wasn't actually that much a part of it, it was enough that it was there. There was no edge at all when he left, in my
Right.
opinion. Nobody cared about Interview anymore. I mean, I was reading Interview before I ever come to New York, before I even came to America.
Right.
But I just stopped. It was sad when he died because I was sharing a cab home from him from, I guess, I feel like I'm name dropping, but I guess we want to talk about these people.
Well, it's
right?
historic. Yeah,
Okay,
and it's telling your story as well.
I was coming home from a party given by Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall, and I was with Tina Chow, and strangely enough, Tina Chow, Andy, and they're both dead now, and myself. And we dropped off Tina first, and then he was next, and both were vibrantly alive and well at the time, and he said that he was against Western medicine, and he feared that hospitals were like graveyards, that when you go into them, you never come out. And then a year later, that's exactly what
Very
happened.
prescient.
I was getting disenchanted with New York, because New York was changing. It was no longer the bohemian special place it used to be. It was getting gentrified and McDonaldized, and nothing was covert.
Right.
Everything was, if you had a credit card, then you could go anywhere. Nothing was really sacred on that level. It was too cleaned up. Like Debbie Harry once said, you need shit for things to grow. I mean, it was just everything was too cleaned up. It was a nice, safe, rich place for people to shop in, rich people. Then, of course, there was the last of CBGBs. I mean, while it still really was what it was,
Right.
it's kind of just like a caricature itself.
It's a brand now. Yeah.
Well, apparently it's being moved to
Las Vegas, yes. Hilly's moving.
Go figure.
Well, Hilly's going to finally make some
Bowery,
money,
too.
you know,
Well, good.
really. And now he has an opportunity to cash out. And, you know, Vegas is Disneyland, as we know, so.
So I sort of shifted tribes from New York to India.